Oh, hold on. I got to waddle up here, guys. It's going to take a bit. Hi, I'm Tiffany. This is Ford. He's our fourth, so we call him Ford the Fourth because I am cheesy and I like it when things rhyme. But before we start, I do want to just clarify something. I am not going to go into labor at any minute. I know. Like, this is a lot. Like, I know. But I actually have 2 more months. Pray for me. God, pray for me. I have 2 more months, so no one in the front row has to catch. I don't need a breathing coach. Like, we're good. Like, we got it. All right? All right? All right. Let's jump into this. This is actually one of my favorite things to do. And if you've been here, you know this is probably when I start to cry because I always cry. And I'm hormonal, so this is just going to be a mess, guys. Like, this is just going to be something. Like, I'm going to warn you now. But I love getting to do this. I love getting to talk to people about their stories. I love getting to hear, especially when people get to share their stories in such impactful ways, because I say it over and over and over and over, and will say it over and over and over, that stories save lives. Sharing our stories, sharing our traumas, our pains, our hearts, our joys, give us a way to connect with other people that can change the course of someone's life. It's one of the things that I love to get to do, and I love to get to sit in here. So, like, Skip and Brittany, thank you guys so much for sharing your stories. I know how scary it can be to stand here and say you're messy, to say you're ugly, to not have the cute little Instagram story. You guys know what I mean? Like when you like brush stuff to the side so you can take a picture of like the clean part of your house. Like, those are fun stories. Those are great stories. But our messy stories, our messy Me Too moments have so much more power in them. I've shared before, and I'll share it again, and I think it's funny how relevant it is now, especially being pregnant again, that when I was pregnant with my 3rd child, I actually contemplated, planned, was ready to do the math to find out how old she needed to be in the womb for me to die and her to survive. Because I couldn't see myself going on. I couldn't do it. I felt like I had no hope. I felt like I couldn't do it anymore. And it is a messy, messy story that thankfully I have walked through, and everyone was okay, and our family is great. And I have a beautiful daughter out of it who's the only girl. Help us now. But it was the messiest part of my story. Or so I thought. Because let's be honest, this doesn't stop, does it? Life doesn't just suddenly get easier after you've walked through one thing. It doesn't suddenly become rainbows and butterflies and you'll never have a pain, or you'll never have trauma, or you'll never have hurt ever again. That doesn't happen. But what I've learned is not only can these stories save lives, but these stories also end stigmas, right? Which I love what everyone has said so far tonight, because I'm like, oh, it's kind of like this was orchestrated in some cosmic way that we're all like reaffirming each other. Go figure. I don't know how that happened. But we're talking about ending the stigma within me. What was it in me that made me feel like I couldn't go on? What was it in me that I have been carrying that makes life hard, that makes things hurt, that wakes me up in the middle of the night crying or having a panic attack and I don't know why? What are those things? What are those breakdown moments? And where do we go after we have those breakdown moments? I think there's only two options, okay? Go with me. This is just my Tiffany had an epiphany. So if you don't agree with me, it's okay, just don't tell me, because I like to be right. So there are two options, okay? We can stay in our little social media, Instagram, square posts, hashtag stories save lives, or we can move towards healing. We can stay, I'm going to totally age myself in this, but we can stay in our little Nashville filter, right? With the little cute blue background and little fuzz so everything looks poreless. Or we can get dirty and gritty and actually work towards healing. But that kind of feels scary, right? Does that feel scary to anyone else? Kind of makes your throat get a little dry, a little sweaty, which is also hormones, but whatever. A little sweaty, a little terrified. Because what does that look like? We know our pain, and we know our trauma, and we know our stories in that. And there's, at least for me, almost a comfort, right? In knowing that we know what's going to hurt us, but we don't know what healing looks like. Why does it feel so scary to work towards healing? To get help? To go to a doctor? To call a doctor? Does anybody have anxiety picking up the phone and ordering pizza? I think the Domino's app is the best thing ever created because I really don't have to talk to anybody. Why is it so scary to admit to a loved one that we're not okay? To start therapy? To stay in therapy? That's hard. Why is it scarier to seek freedom from healing than it is to stay in the pain and the trauma of our stories? A part of me wants to say it's because we have to do work, and I don't want to do work. My poor therapist, love her to death, but I don't know how many times she has said, Tiffany, why don't you sit in that? And I go, I don't want to. I don't want to. I'm not doing it. No. But I think it might be more than that. I think it might not be that we don't want to do the work. I think it's that we don't see our own value. I'm going to say that one more time. I think it might be that we don't see our own value. Maybe we don't see ourselves having enough value to spend the money or spend the time or find the resources or find the support. Maybe we don't see that we have enough power to rewrite our story. Because that's what healing is, right? Healing is the process of rewriting our stories. So I'd love for you to take a minute and think about it. Do you believe you have the right to rewrite your story? Really, think about it. Do you believe you have the right to rewrite your story? I think it's a really, really hard question when you've lived in trauma or through trauma. Because the trauma of our lives do you guys know what trauma brings? It brings blame and shame. And if you've ever been around icuTalks long enough and you've seen Kim Honeycutt talk about blame and shame, you know. If you haven't, please get on icuTalks YouTube page and look up anything that says Kim Honeycutt, blame, shame. And I'm not trying to get brownie points from Kim saying this. But it's so amazing and so changes how you view your story and how you view rewriting your story. Because I think the way I've internalized it, my epiphany, was that blame created the identity of villain for me in my story. I was the villain of my story. I was so broken. That's why certain traumas happened to me. It was my fault. It wasn't the person who victimized me. It was me. Because if I wasn't broken, it wouldn't have happened. If I wasn't weak, I would have never thought about killing myself. Never, because I was just too weak and too broken. And I would never be a good enough mom. I would never be good enough because I was so broken that all I was going to do was destroy my kids. So why be a part of their lives before I had a chance to do that? When we give ourselves the position of villain, it gives us a sense of control, right? We now have an identity. We now have a control because nothing that happened to us was out of our control. We also get a really good wardrobe if you look at like TV. Like the villains always have great boots. But anyways, right? But what we don't see is that we are just being typecast by blame. We're not the villain. We're the victim. And if you are anything like me, that makes you want to be sick because it's like, no, I have the control. I am not the victim. But to end it, to end stigma and blame and shame, we have to rewrite our stories. So how do we do that? How do we write our stories? All right? I'm going to give you 3 words, and I'm going to give them to you now instead of spacing them out because I am incredibly ADHD, and I don't want to forget to tell you all 3 points. So this is what happens when you're unmedicated and ADHD. So here are your 3 points. To rewrite your story, you have to realize, retract, and redefine. Don't you just love that? Realize, retract, and redefine. Do you guys know how much I love that they all start with R-E and how proud of myself I am for that? Thank you. You are so my people. And here's the thing. The first step, the realizing, is the hardest step. It's also the step I call therapy sucks. Therapist loves that one. It is what we call therapy sucks. Because I don't know about you, but I start sweating when I get anxious. I start doing weird things with my hands. Weird stuff starts happening, okay? But I struggle with connecting the physical that's going on in my body to what is going on emotionally, to what that trauma was, what that lie was. And then you end up feeling like you're in this cycle, right? Has anybody ever done this? You're doing the work. You're in therapy. You don't have to raise your hand. It's fine. We just kind of assume we all are. So you're in therapy. You're doing the work. It feels like you're finally getting your head above water, right? You're like, I got this. We're good. Look at me go. I'm taking notes at therapy, right? And then you have an epiphany of an old wound that you're like, didn't know that still hurt. And it brings in another layer of pain, another layer of processing. More, I don't wanna. And it's hard to see that it's going to bring eventual healing. But you didn't realize that hurt was still there. You didn't realize that wound was still there. You didn't realize that cause was still there. Kind of makes you feel like you're a Freudian meme, where it's like you're laying on the couch going, but my mother, for the 50th time, right? But if you don't know where those landmines are, how are you going to work through them? The next one's easier. It's retract. It makes me think of like Star Trek. I'm so nerdy, guys. Like, honestly, I really am a big nerd. Like Star Trek or Star Wars, where you have like the laser beam that's like pulling something out, right? Right? So you have what you've realized, and you've pulled it out, and you've retracted it. So now what do you do with this little villain? Because that's your real villain, right? You're not the villain. This little situation, this is the villain. You have to retract it. What I love is the definition of retract. Retracting means withdrawing a statement or accusation as untrue or unjustified. The other thing I call it is, would I say that to someone else? Because we can say really mean, awful things to ourselves. We are really good at bullying ourselves. For years, I believed, and it still likes to pop up because that's what trauma does, is that I almost committed suicide when I was pregnant with my daughter because I was going to destroy her as a person, because I am never going to be a good enough mom because I'm too broken. Could you imagine me walking up to someone and saying, oh, I'm so sorry that you've had a situation where you were hospitalized. It's because you're not good enough. Could you imagine walking up to someone and saying those things? But we say them to ourselves all the time. So then what do? Once we know what we've said, what do we do now? Does anybody remember? Redefine. A+ gold star. Redefine. I'm not a bad mom. I'm not always the best mom. Kids eat cereal a lot for dinner right now, but I'm pregnant, so we're just going to go with it. But I'm broken, but I'm beautifully broken. I have trauma in my life that we've worked through, but that doesn't mean that I'm not enough. If I take that little retracted statement and I say, I almost committed suicide when I was pregnant with my daughter because I have bipolar disorder. My brain does not create the chemicals that it was supposed to create to stay stable. And when you add hormones, sleep deprivation, a wicked coffee addiction, and 2 other little rowdy boys that were 2 and 1, something's got to give. Especially when you don't know how to ask for help. Because, I am the firstborn of my family, so we don't ask for help very well. So how do I redefine that? I have bipolar disorder. Things get hard. But by grace and love and self-forgiveness, I can walk through these things and work through these things. So thanks, guys. Thanks. I always feel so good about myself after this. So once you've realized, once you've retracted, and once you've redefined, it all repeats over and over again. It does. It'd be so easy to be like, check, check, check. All right, moving on, right? So today at about 2:30, I was running through this talk in my head and out loud on my phone to time it because firstborn can't help it. Like, things have to line up. And I started getting this ucky pit in my stomach. And I thought, oh, God, what now? Right? I'm like, I don't have time for this. I'm trying to curl my hair, and this takes a minute. And I've got kids that need to learn their math, because on top of everything, we homeschool our kids. I don't know. Don't ask. So I've got kids that are struggling with 4 times 8. I do not remember what 4 times 8 is. And so I'm trying to explain to my kid why he needs to know this. And he's like, do you know this? And I'm like, go ask Alexa. So I'm sweating, and I'm like, what is wrong with me? I'm fine. This is fine. Like, I don't understand. And my jaw starts clenching up, and I'm like, what is going on? And then I have my therapist in my head going, why don't you sit in that for a minute? And I'm like, yeah. When I first found out I was pregnant this time, I lost it. I was so scared that I had already gotten my safe card by making it through my third pregnancy without dying, that I wasn't going to make it through this one. I felt like I had already had my chance, and I destroyed it, because who gets a surprise pregnancy at 37? I felt like I had destroyed my kids' life. They're all 12, 10, and 8, so we're in big kid mode. And now we got little baby mode again. I felt like this poor little boy was never going to have a good relationship with his siblings because there's such an age gap. I felt like I had ruined my family in every way, shape, and form, because if I was smart enough, if I was good enough, I would have had a better plan. I would have stuck to a plan. We would have been good. Everything would have been okay. If I wasn't not on medication, our school year would look drastically different. Our home life would look drastically different. That yet again, I've messed up because I wasn't enough. And then I sat and sobbed. And it just made it so much more transparent, so much more real, so much more aware that this process doesn't stop on this side of heaven, y'all. It doesn't. And I've said it before, and I will say it again, that on this side of heaven, you have healing that can come miraculously. Like, I do believe that. Like, I do believe that there is miraculous healing. But not everybody is going to experience that. And that doesn't make your healing any less if you had to get in the trenches and dig day after day after day and believe moment after moment after moment that it gets better. So after I sobbed, redid all my makeup, that was fun. It just made me so much more passionate about the fact that our stories, as little as it is, it took me 2 minutes to tell you guys about crying my makeup off. Such a small story, but it could have so much power and so much impact in not just saving lives, but in ending the stigmas that people have and that people carry about these stories. So I want you guys to, while the worship team comes back on, take a moment with me and close your eyes and